Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Commander Crucible. In today's quick look, we're going to be looking at Polukranos Unchained. Polukranos is a legendary zombie Hydra for 2 colorless, a black, and a green. He starts out as a 0/0. His text says, when Polukranos enters the battlefield, he enters with 6 +1/+1 counters on him, and it escapes with 12 +1/+1 counters on it. If damage would be dealt to Polukranos while it has a +1/+1 counter on it, prevent that damage, and remove that many +1/+1 counters from it. He also has the text, pay 1 black and a green, and Polukranos fights another target creature. The last line of text has his escape cost for 4 black and a green. You must exile 6 other cards from your graveyard and then cast him for his escape cost. Polukranos is a very interesting card and a very interesting concept, especially in Golgari. We haven't really seen much in the way of a creature that has a staple that can fight other creatures on it. He can escape from graveyards. When he does escape, he gets stronger. He can't take damage, or when he does take damage, you have to remove that many +1/+1 counters on him, so effectively when you're fighting another creature, he gets weaker, or when he blocks or gets blocked, he's going to become weaker. So my first thought in this quick look is we need to find a way to put more 1/1 counters on him after he takes that damage, after we fight an annoying creature. So we fight something, he loses 4 or 5 counters, then we use another spell to give him more counters. So it's almost like we're not losing that. Then when we go to combat, someone might block, we kill their creature, Polukranos gets weaker, then we're able to bounce back and make him even stronger. And a very strong ability on Polukranos is his fight ability, as you don't have to tap him or anything, you just have to pay that 3 mana and he will fight another creature. He is effectively removal on your commander, which, as you've probably experienced with cards like Yawgmoth or the Orzhov Teysa, having removal stapled onto your commander is insanely powerful, and especially at instant speed when you can just deal with a problem creature right there, and we're going to try and find a way where we can bounce back from that really quickly. So just remember, this is a quick look, this is not a full 100 card breakdown. We're just going to take a look at what I think makes Polukranos special and what can make him broken in your playgroup. The first category we're going to look at, obviously the one I always start off with, the thing that I always look at when building a new EDH deck, are what legendaries can we put in this deck to just make it really cool. I love having a bunch of legendary creatures that are going to synergize with our main commander, and they act sort of as the generals to the deck, the things that are just going to help us, the things that we want out. So first off, we have Jared, Golgari Lichlord for black, green, green. He's a legendary zombie elf. Jared, Golgari Lichlord gets a +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, so he starts as a 2/2 and he'll get stronger from there. Then we pay the same cost as on Polukranos, 1 black and a green, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the creature's sacrificed power. Now, I included Jared in on this list because let's say we have our Polukranos escape and he's now a 12/12. We pay that 3 mana, we sacrifice Polukranos, and each of our opponents are going to take 12 damage. It just seems really strong, especially if we have a way to make the escape cost cheaper or to just cheat Polukranos out of the graveyard after that. We can just deal 12 later in the game. I think Jared has a really good ability to close games out, especially because he just deals that damage, and in Golgari you don't really have a way to deal a lot of damage without going to combat, so Jared's just a good way to get damage rolling or to kill a few opponents possibly, and then leave you in a good 1v1 situation against your last opponent. Next we have Pure Imaginative Rascal for 2 and a green. He partners with Toothy, but we can't run Toothy in this deck, so we won't worry about him going to find Toothy when he enters. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be put on a permanent your team controls, that many +1 of each of those kind of counters are put on that permanent instead. Now, Pure is not going to be as good as Doubling Season because it will not double the counters, but Pure is just going to put extra 1/1 counters, especially with the things further along in this Commander Quick Look. Pier is going to be able to just put 2 instead of 1. And he only adds 1 more, so he doesn't add 1 more for each 1/1 counter. It says 1 or more. So if we put 3 +1/+1 counters on Polukranos, he will get 4. He will not get 6. So Pier is just great to have in this deck. He's cheap, he's small, he's almost out of the way. He's not really going to be targeted for your removal, but he's going to be nice to get Polukranos those extra +1/+1 counters. Next we have Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, for 1 black and a green. She's a legendary human warrior. Rayhan, Last of the Abzan, enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature you control dies or is put into the command zone, great with our commander Polukranos, if it had 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, which Polukranos always will, you may put that many +1/+1 counters on target creature. So if Polukranos had the 12 +1/+1 counters, or hopefully more than that, throughout the course of the game, let's say he gets removed, or you sacrifice him to Jared, you're going to get to put 12 +1/+1 counters on a creature that you control. I think Rayhan's just icing on the cake. Let's say you put 12 1/1 counters on Pier, and now he's at 13, then you cast Polukranos again, and he comes in with 6 +1/+1 counters, and you effectively have a ton of power on the board. You're now a threat. You have big creatures, and then let's say you use Jared's ability again, you deal 6 damage to your opponents, you put 6 +1/+1 counters on Pier, go to combat. Now you just have this massive creature. Rayhan is sneakily good in this deck. And the last legendary creature I want to look at is Vorolz, the Scar Striped, for 1 black and a green. He's a legendary troll warrior. Each creature card in your graveyard has Scavenge. The Scavenge cost is equal to its mana cost. Exile a creature card from your graveyard and pay its mana cost. Then put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that card's power on target creature. You can only scavenge as a sorcery. He also has another text that says, sacrifice another creature and regenerate Vorolz, but we're going to mainly be looking at him for this scavenge ability. So we can either scavenge away, well, we don't want to scavenge away Polukranos as his power is 0/0, but we can scavenge away other creatures throughout our deck to put those counters on Polukranos. So if we fight another creature, he loses 4 or 5 counters, then we scavenge away a 6 power creature. Those 6 counters go on Polukranos, and he effectively goes back up to that power that he was at before he fought something. So Vorolz is more or less there to filter out creatures from your graveyard to buff Polukranos. The next category we have is extra +1/+1 counters. The first card I want to talk about is Corpsejack Menace. It is a 2 colorless, black-green for a 4/4 creature fungus. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put onto a creature you control, put twice that many +1/+1 counters on it instead. So when Polukranos enters, instead of 6, he'll have 12, and then if we escape him from our graveyard, he will have 24 instead of 12. You can't build this deck without Corpsejack Menace. This card is going to just be a lifesaver in your deck to have a 24/24 that can fight something, get it out of the way on an opponent's end step. You deal with their big problem creature or their blocker, it gets back to you. Polukranos is now an 18/18 or whatever he is. You're just going to be smashing through with some big damage. Another card is Forgotten Ancient for 3 and a green. He's an elemental. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. He's a 0/3 is what he starts off as. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto another creature. So, Forgotten Ancient, obviously spells are going to be slung in EDH from 3 different players. And he says whenever a player, so your spells count towards its +1/+1 counters as well. So let's say you just get a 1 go around the table and 6 spells have been cast. Then at the beginning of your upkeep, you move those 6 counters onto Polukranos, giving him more counters. And the Forgotten Ancient is a 0/3, so he's not even small. He's not something like a 1/1 or a 0/1. He can still block even if he doesn't have those +1/+1 counters on him. This card is going to be broken in this deck, as it will just fill Polukranos back up with +1/+1 counters as he fights things, or blocks, or attacks. Next is an obvious one. We have Hardened Scales for 1 green. If one or more +1/+1 counters will be placed onto a creature you control, put that many 1/1 counters, put that many +1/+1/+1 counters on that creature instead. So this card is effectively Peer. So again, let's say we just managed to put one +1/+1 counter on Polukranos, and we have Peer and Hardened Scales out, it will go to 3 instead of 1. Really cheap enchantment, it's 1 green, we just want this in this deck if it's in our opening hand or whatnot. We're just going to be adding more 1/1 counters onto Polukranos as the game goes on. Next is a really interesting card from Theros Beyond Death with Polukranos is Hydra's Growth. For 2 and a green, we get an enchantment aura, enchant creature. When Hydra's Growth enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on enchanted creature. Then, at the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of +1/+1 counters on enchanted creature. This card, Polukranos is going to enter with 6. It enters, it will give him 1 to go to 7. Then, at the beginning of our upkeep, it will go to 14. That is without Peer or Hardened Scales or Corpsejack Menace on the battlefield. So right away, we have a great uncommon enchantment to just buff up Polukranos to make him massive on our upkeep. It is 3 mana, it's cheap. This is probably going to be a big source of removal for your opponents, but this will just, we fight something with Polukranos, we get him down to 4 counters. On our upkeep, it doubles back up to 8. And if we have Corpsejack Menace, Hardened Scales, or Peer, it goes up even more. This card, you must put this in this deck. The next card is Obsessive Skinner for 2 mana, colorless and a green. It's a creature human rogue. When Obsessive Skinner enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Then it has Delirium. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, put a 1/1 counter on target creature. In EDH, it's not going to be hard to find some self-milling cards. With Polukranos and his escape cost, we're going to want some self-mill tech in this deck so we can fill our graveyard with and get that Delirium trigger. Then, around the table, you're going to go opponent 1, 2, and 3, and you're going to get 3 extra counters on Polukranos. Each go around the table to just keep him big, keep +3, then it's your turn. And Obsessive Skinner, it's a cheap card, it's going to keep your mana curve low. It is a 1/1 however, but it is going to be a lifesaver to just keep getting those counters on Polukranos without dedicating an entire spell to putting a 1/1 counter on Polukranos. We can get a creature that will do this every upkeep for our opponents. We have Ordeal of Nyala. For 1 and a green, it's an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, you put a 1/1 counter on it. Then if it has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, sacrifice the Ordeal of Nyala. When you sacrifice the Ordeal, search your library for 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped. This card, I included it in the deck tech because it's going to trigger the first time that we attack with Polukranos, get a +1/+1 counter. Then Polukranos will have more than 3, obviously, as he enters with 6. We will have to sacrifice the Ordeal, but it ramps us right away. So usually in a deck, you would include this card, you would attack 3 times, you get +3/+3, then you sacrifice it, and then you get your basics. We can just pay 2 mana, attack with Polukranos, he gets a +1, then we sacrifice it, we get 2 basics, so we're buffing our commander, we're doing what we want, and we tutor for lands to help ramp us. Next we have Shambling Shell, 1 black and a green, a creature, plant zombie, which says sacrifice Shambling Shell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And it also has Dredge 3. If you would draw a card instead, you may put exactly 3 cards from the top of your library into your graveyard, and if you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. Otherwise, draw a card. So we're going to play Shambling Shell, sacrifice it, we're going to put a 1/1 counter on to Polukranos, then at the beginning of our draw step, or the next time we draw a card, we're going to mill 3, that is going to help with Polukranos' escape cost, or to trigger the Delirium for the Obsessive Skinner, and we're just going to keep casting this cheap 3 mana spell to put counters on Polukranos. We can even go to blockers and go into a blocking phase with the Shambling Shell, sacrifice it, no damage will be dealt by the creature it's blocking, then Shambling Shell will put the 1/1 counter on Polukranos. Next we have the Sword of Truth and Justice for 3 colorless mana. A equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and blue, some really good removal colors. Whenever the equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, then you proliferate. So we're going to put a +1/+1 counter on Polukranos, then we're going to proliferate, so effectively we're going to put 2 on him. Again, without Corpse Jack Menace, without Peer, without Hardened Scales. With all those things out, we're going to be putting a ton on Polukranos that's going to allow him to attack and to fight something every time around the table. Next we have Winding Constrictor, one of my favorite cards out of Kaladesh. For black and a green, we have a snake, a 2/3 snake. If one or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, that many of those counters +1 are placed on that permanent instead. Then if you would get one or more counters, you may add one of those counters as well. So again, the Winding Constrictor is going to act like a Hardened Scales, like a Peer. It's going to give an additional +1/+1 each time we put one on Polukranos. Next we have Vigor. For 3 colorless, green, 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 it is an elemental incarnation, a 6/6 with trample. If damage would be dealt to another creature you control, prevent that damage. Put a 1/1 counter on this creature for each 1 damage prevented this way. When Vigor is put in a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. So Vigor, it's going to allow us to use Polukranos as a 12/12. Let's say we used its escape cost. We pay 3, we attack a large creature. Let's say that we attack a 6/6. We have them fight. Polukranos will then get no damage dealt to it, as Vigor says, if damage would be dealt. It doesn't say combat damage. Polukranos will kill the creature, take no damage, he will remove no +1/+1 counters, and then add 6 +1/+1 counters on him. Vigor is going to be broken in this deck, and you are going to want to use your green and black tutors to get this card out every time. This will make this deck broken. Next we have Death's Presence. For 5 and a green, it's an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control dies, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control, where X is the power of the creature that died. It's an expensive enchantment, but if we have other creatures that die, Polukranos is just going to get bigger, or if Polukranos dies, we can make our other creatures bigger, and we want Polukranos going to the graveyard anyway to pay for its escape cost. So if we just had it go back to the command zone, it wouldn't count as technically dying. So as soon as it goes to the graveyard, which is exactly where we want it, we're going to put more counters on our creatures to make our board just bigger, because in this deck we don't have to focus on strictly making Polukranos huge. We can make our whole board big as well. The last one in the extra +1/+1 counters is the Foe Razor Regent. For 5 green green. It's a dragon, a 4/5 flyer. That says, when Foe Razor Regent enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. Whenever a creature you control fights, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it at the beginning of the next end step. This card synergizes with Polukranos insanely well. I don't know what more to say. You pay the 3, you have Polukranos fight something, he loses the counters, then at the beginning of the next end step he gains 2. This card, it just does things without us it does things with us just playing our deck, with us just using Polukranos the way we want him to fight other things, and we get more counters. What more can you ask? Next, we have our good stuff section. So first off, in the good stuff section, and a big thing that I've seen a lot of these escape decks running, is Altar of Dementia. So our 2 mana artifacts, sacrifice a creature, target player mills cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of their library. So if we have Altar of Dementia, and let's say Polukranos is going to die, or there's going to be a board wipe, we're going to sacrifice Polukranos to Altar of Dementia, we're going to mill 6 or even 12, then we're going to have those cards to pay for Polukranos' escape cost. This card, you can use it against your opponents if you mill them 12, but mainly what we want to use Altar of Dementia for is to pay for Polukranos' escape cost to get him those 12 +1/+1 counters the next time he's out. Another card that came out in Theros Beyond Death is the Gravebreaker Lamia. For 4 colorless and a black, it's an enchantment creature, Snake Lamia. It's a 4/4 with lifelink, and says, when Gravebreaker Lamia enters the battlefield, search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard. Right there we have something that's just going to allow us to tutor our deck, put something in our graveyard that we can use to get back I don't know what you're going to grab, but putting things in your graveyard is great for an Aristocrat style deck or a Reanimator style deck. So the Gravebreaker Lamia is going to get us something to our graveyard, and then it says spells you cast from your graveyard cost 1 less to cast. Again, I don't know what other cards you are all going to use for your Polukranos deck to cast from your graveyard, but we can use Polukranos' escape cost, so instead of 6 mana, it's down to 5, which will help us in a big way. Just reducing it by 1 is going to make it a lot more beneficial for us to cast from our graveyard. We have Greater Good, which is going to do something similar to Altar of Dimension. Greater Good is 2 green. It's an enchantment that says sacrifice a creature, draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, then discard 3 cards. So we sacrifice Polukranos, we draw 6 or 12 cards, then we discard 3 cards, again further fueling our escape cost for later on, a really good source of card draw if Polukranos or another creature is going to die anyway. Next we have the Magebane armor for 3 colorless. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+4 and loses flying, and that's fine because Polukranos does not have flying. Prevent all non-combat damage that would be dealt to equipped creature, and an equip cost of 2. So Polukranos, this is going to be used when he fights things. So we're going to pay our 3 mana, we're going to have him fight with the Magebane armor equipped, and he will not lose his +1/+1 counters as it stops all non-combat damage. Next we have Night Howler for 1 black and a bestow cost of 2 black. You may cast this card for its bestow cost. It's an aura spell with enchant creature. It becomes a creature again if it's not attached to a creature. So Night Howler and the enchanted creature both get +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. I included this on the deck tech more or less to just make Polukranos massive. This card really doesn't synergize with his +1/+1 counters or anything like that, but if we are self-milling the whole game and creatures have died, it's late game, we bestow the Night Howler onto Polukranos and he's already a 12/12 or a 24/24, however big he is, the Night Howler just gives him +20/+20, and your opponents are in kill shot range at this point with such a large creature. Even if they've been gaining life or they haven't lost much life throughout the game, Night Howler with Polukranos can just kill someone with 1 attack. Next we have the Nyx Weaver for 1 black and green. It's an enchantment creature spider. It has reach, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Again, we're just going to be fueling Polukranos' escape cost with this. It also has pay 1 black and a green, so its casting cost. You can exile the Nyx Weaver, and then you return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So you can use it like an Eternal Witness to just, if we really need something back that we can't reanimate, we're going to get it back with Nyx Weaver. Next we have Overwhelming Stampede. So for 3 green, it's a sorcery that says until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. And I'm going to lump this in with the Pathbreaker Ibex, which is only 1 mana more, and it's on a creature that says it's 4 mana green for a creature goat. Whenever Pathbreaker Ibex attacks, creatures you control gain trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So they're going to do very similar things. They both give your whole team trample, so when Polukranos is going to, let's say he's only a 12/12, he's going to give your entire team +12/+12, and they gain trample. Pathbreaker Ibex and Overwhelming Stampede are just going to end the game. When you have these cards out and you attack with them, the game will end. You're going to give your entire team +12/+12 at the very least if you casted Polukranos for your escape cost. I don't know what more to say about that. These cards are just going to end the game if they're not countered or dealt with, or there's not a board wipe, a Cyclonic Rift, anything like that. You will kill all of your opponents. So that was all the cards that I've put together for this Commander Quick Look on Polukranos Unchained. When I first saw him, I really thought that he was a good inclusion in the Golgari Legendaries, as Golgari is a very strong color pairing, especially with its tutors and its ramp. And then you can also do your tutors, your graveyard, reanimation, and that just seems exactly what this deck wants to do. And meanwhile, it staples on the fight mechanic onto your commander. So you have removal, you have +1/+1 counters, and then throughout your deck you're going to have self-mill to pay for the escape. and then you're going to have your tutors and your ramp to just make this deck really, really solid. You're going to be able to get out whatever you need at the time. You're going to have a great removal colors with like Abrupt Decay and your Assassin's Trophy. Meanwhile, you have your ramp to be solid. You will never struggle to get that 6 mana in the late game. You don't have to rely on artifacts or anything like that. So far, I am really impressed with Theros Beyond Death, and I really enjoy where Magic the Gathering is headed after we've kind of wrapped up the Gatewatch story. And I'm really excited to see where we go next as we have the Lair of Behemoths and Ikora, or whatever the next set is, and especially with this new large commander set where there's going to be many, many new legendary creatures that we can't even begin to imagine. So stay tuned as we're going to dive more into those sets, maybe some other creatures from Theros Beyond Death. Leave in the comments down below on who you think I should take a commander quick look at next. Thanks for watching.